Tonight, we are not just talking about a family. We are talking about political technology. Before you get comfortable, like the video and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy long-form historical breakdowns. And tell me where you're watching from, because the story we're about to discuss does not belong only to Britain. The monarchy shaped borders, languages, trade networks, famines, migrations, and wars across nearly every inhabited continent. Now dim the lights, settle in, and let's talk about why a crown still exists in the 21st century. By 1914, monarchy was still a normal form of government in Europe. This is hard to imagine today, but at the start of the 20th century, most major European states were ruled by royal families. The continent was essentially a web of related dynasties. Many kings and emperors were literal cousins. Queen Victoria's descendants sat on multiple thrones across Europe. Then World War I began, and the war did something new in human history. It mobilized entire societies, not just armies, but factories, farms, railroads, and schools. Civilians were no longer spectators. To conflict, they were participants in industrialized warfare, and that created a political problem for when a war involves entire populations, people begin asking a dangerous question: why do some families rule us at all? Millions of soldiers were dying in trenches filled with mud, rats, and gas attacks. The war no longer felt like a heroic contest between noble rulers. It felt like a catastrophe produced by governments themselves. The prestige of hereditary authority began to collapse. Russia was the first major example. In 1917, the Russian Revolution overthrew Tsar Nicholas II. He and his family were later executed. The German Kaiser abdicated. The Austro-Hungarian emperor lost his empire. The Ottoman Sultan's authority disappeared soon after. In just a few years, centuries of European monarchy ended. Britain watched all of this very carefully, because Britain had a problem. The royal family was German. The British royal family in 1914 did not actually have a British last name. They were the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. That is not a subtle name. That is a name that sounds like it arrived in a diplomatic carriage with paperwork and a monocle. And during a war against Germany, it was politically dangerous. German bombers called Gotha aircraft were literally attacking British cities. Newspapers printed and public anger was rising. Now imagine reading headlines about German attacks and realizing your king belongs to a German dynasty. This was a crisis of legitimacy. The monarchy understood something crucial. Monarchy does not survive on law alone. It survives on emotional acceptance. So in 1917, King George V made a decision that saved the institution. He changed the family name. The royal family became the House of Windsor. The name came from Windsor Castle, an ancient and unmistakably English symbol. Overnight, the monarchy reintroduced itself, not as a European dynasty, but as a national family. This was not just a cosmetic change, it was political communication. The crown was repositioning itself as part of the people rather than above them. A new role, the national symbol. Before World War I, monarchs were associated with governing. After World War I, the British monarch became associated with representing. George V began visiting hospitals, meeting wounded soldiers, and appearing publicly with ordinary citizens. Photographs circulated widely. The royal family adopted a carefully managed accessibility. The message was simple. The monarch shared national suffering. This mattered because the British government was implementing mass conscription. Millions of families were sending sons to the front lines. The monarchy had to appear connected to sacrifice, or it would appear irrelevant. This was the birth of the modern ceremonial monarchy. The king no longer led armies personally. Instead, he led national morale. And here's the clever part. This role was politically safe. If the government made a bad military decision, blame fell on elected officials. If the country needed unity, the monarch provided it. The monarchy gained emotional authority while losing practical responsibility. It was a remarkably durable arrangement. Propaganda and the creation of tradition. During and after the war, Britain developed modern mass media, newspapers, radio broadcasts, photography, and eventually film news. The monarchy used these technologies very effectively. Public ceremonies increased. Royal weddings became national events. Coronations were staged with careful visual symbolism. What looked ancient was often recently formalized. Many centuries-old traditions were standardized in the 20th century. Why? Because rituals create continuity. After a traumatic war, societies want reassurance that something permanent exists. The monarchy became that reassuring presence. The institution began operating almost like a national theater production. Every uniform, carriage, and procession communicated stability. The crown was no longer merely inherited authority. It was curated identity. Why Britain didn't become a republic? This raises a big question. Why did Britain keep its monarchy when other countries abolished theirs? Several reasons mattered. First, the British monarchy accepted limitations earlier than others. Parliament already controlled taxation and legislation. The king was not seen as directly responsible for political failures. Second, the monarchy adapted quickly. Instead of resisting democratic change, it aligned itself with it symbolically. The king did not oppose elections. He endorsed national unity. Third, Britain won the war. Victory changes public perception. The system that survives a major war often gains legitimacy simply by outlasting its rivals. In Germany and Russia, monarchies were associated with defeat and collapse. In Britain, monarchy was associated with So while many European crowns fell because they appeared outdated and obstructive, the British crown survived because it appeared supportive and continuous. The survival strategy. By the end of World War I, the monarchy had completed a transformation. It was no longer primarily a governing institution. It had become a symbolic institution embedded within a democratic state. The monarch would open parliament, sign legislation, meet diplomats, and represent the nation internationally, but real decision-making belonged to elected government. This created a paradox. The monarchy was politically weak, but culturally powerful. It did not need to rule directly anymore. Its function was psychological and ceremonial. It provided a stable identity in a rapidly changing century of revolutions, economic crises, and ideological conflict. And this model would be tested again very soon, because the 20th century still had another world war waiting, and the monarchy would face its greatest public relations disaster before it could face its greatest moment of popularity.